Federal workers returned to their jobs Monday, but the day was anything but normal. That's because the shutdown left an overwhelming amount of work, as well as uncertainty, as another funding deadline looms. The funding fight will no doubt be a major focus of the State of the Union address, which we now know will happen on February 5th. CBS News Chief Congressional Correspondent Nancy Cordes has the latest.
Hundreds of thousands of federal employees headed back to work today to deal with a daunting 5-week backlog. 5 million pieces of unopened mail at the IRS alone. It could take a year to catch up.
What a devastating and pointless exercise this has been.
The Congressional Budget Office painting a grim picture of the shutdown's toll. $11 billion in lost GDP, $3 billion of which will not be recovered. Hardest hit, the CBO says, are private sector entities that will never recoup that lost income.
For the month of January, we're only going to have 4 days of billing.
Wesley McClure runs Unispec, a D.C. firm that provides personnel to government agencies. His 75 employees lost 5 weeks' pay and, temporarily, their health care coverage because he couldn't cover the premiums.
We have a lot of folks with real chronic illnesses, and so including my own family members. So it's something that hit everybody.
And that had never happened to you before?
Never had a lapse in insurance, never missed a payroll.
And it could all happen again in 3 weeks. The president says there will be another shutdown, or he'll declare a national emergency if 17 congressional leaders can't strike a deal on border security by mid-February. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders argued today the economy could withstand another shutdown if it had to.
There is a real problem at our border. It needs to be fixed, and the president's going to do what it takes to address it.
Nancy Cordes joins me now from Capitol Hill. So, Nancy, we heard in your piece about this massive backlog of work. What other challenges are federal employees facing as they return to their jobs?
Well, for starters, many of them, Elaine, haven't gotten their back pay yet. That's probably going to take a few more days. So they are waiting for that. You know, and then even if they do get that money, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are made completely whole. If you were a federal employee who had a big expense over the past 5 weeks and you didn't have the money to cover it, you either went without or found yourself in a difficult financial situation. So for them, the fact that they're now getting reimbursed after the fact may help ease their financial burden, but doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't go through that hardship in the first place. Beyond that, they have obviously got a lot of work to dig through, no matter what agency they work for. And then they have to worry about the fact that they could be back in this exact same situation come mid-February if there is another government shutdown. And the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders just said in her first White House briefing at the podium in 41 days that the president is willing to go there, that he doesn't want to, but that he believes that this is so important that he is willing to risk the possibility of another government shutdown. And she and other White House advisors said that they don't believe that it would be catastrophic for the economy, although certainly there would be more pain involved for federal workers.
So what precautions are congressional leaders already taking to prevent another shutdown?
Well, they're going to be getting to work this week on that bipartisan commission that will try to come up with some kind of a border security deal that the president can sign. Some challenges for them are that they don't know exactly how big of a deal, how much money has to go into this for him to support it, and they don't know if it needs to specifically include wall funding. The president has been somewhat coy on that front. Beyond that, there has been some talk here on Capitol Hill, Elaine, of legislation that would prevent future shutdowns, that if you got close to the edge and the government hadn't been funded, then a CR would kick in, a continuing resolution. Basically what that means is that the government would continue to be funded at its current levels until members of Congress could work something out. But that is really just in the discussion stages right now. Nobody thinks that anything like that would be passing in the next couple of weeks to prevent the possibility of another shutdown in mid-February.
Well, yeah, on this notion of a wall, the president considered a border wall non-negotiable the first time around. Right. I mean, are there any indications that the White House will soften its stance?
he hasn't said one way or the other. He of course, has indicated that he wants wall funding and that it's very important to him, but he has not said point blank, if you bring me a negotiated deal between Democrats and Republicans that doesn't include wall funding, I'm not signing it. And, we've seen this challenge before where lawmakers, because they don't quite know where the president stands, what he'll take, what he won't take, it makes it very difficult for them to reach a deal, to go out on a limb on various issues when they don't know if they'll get backing from the president himself at the end of the day. So that is another factor in these negotiations. But you are hearing some Republicans, Elaine, say that it will be easier for them if he sort of stays out of it for now, let them come up with a package that the two sides can live with and bring it to him, and and hope that he can get behind it at the end of the day.
Well, as we heard in your piece, the Congressional Budget Office says the shutdown cost the economy a permanent loss of $3 billion.
Right.
How are lawmakers taking that into account during the next negotiations?
Well, they universally say that a shutdown is just terrible politics and terrible policy, that it doesn't help anybody. Everyone ends up worse off. And whether you think that that's a big impact or a small impact on the broader economy, it's clear that, it had a major impact on individuals. And, as bad as it is for federal workers, there are thousands and thousands of federal contractors to whom the government has no obligation to provide back pay if they missed work. So those workers are simply out 5 weeks of pay. That's it. They will never see that money again. So there's also some talk about whether there should be some sort of fail-safe for them in the future to make sure that they get back pay. But that, too, is only in its early stages.
It's really eye-opening to hear some of these ripple effects. Well, how has the passing of the short-term spending bill changed the mood, if at all, on Capitol Hill?
Well, people are a little frustrated. They originally had been planning to be at home in their home districts last week for January recess. That recess got canceled, obviously, which meant that they had to stay here, probably cancel a lot of appearances back home. That never makes anybody very happy. And then they've got this new deadline hanging over them. And, we keep saying it's 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks. Actually, it's really more like 2.5 weeks now, because the clock started on Friday night. That is not a lot of time. Lawmakers, we've seen them struggle for years to work out some kind of border security, immigration deal, and they've always gotten stuck. So, the chances that they're going to be able to sit down and just breeze through this are not very high. Even the president over the weekend told the Wall Street Journal that he puts the chances that they're able to come up with a deal at less than 50-50. So that's not very encouraging from the cheerleader in chief.
Not at all. Nancy Cordes, thank you.
You're welcome.